Well, hello again there, friends and fans. Raptor here, and I truly cannot express how excited I am for the upcoming release of Broken Arrow. It's good to see you all here for a game that seemingly looks a lot like Wargame Red Dragon and also seems to carry the spirit of World in Conflict. This game shown earlier in 2020 at the Slytherin, early year event where they were showing off some of their new games. This trailer you've definitely seen before if you've watched the channel. Later, we'll show a little bit of gameplay, but it is quite promising to see what this game will offer in terms of naval, air, and ground vehicles. And this trailer here raised a lot of questions. If they're making a game to compete against Wargame Red Dragon and the Wargame series, and if Slytherin, a separate developer, is making their own large-scale RTS game that'll feature aircraft and helicopters, obviously making the maps larger, how big will they be? How big will the scenarios or the campaigns be if they're literally paradropping units into the battlefield? Is this a cutscene? I don't know. I have more questions than answers even after the Slytherin event just a day ago, but it definitely gets me hyped to see what the possibilities of other developers branching out into this type of more modern warfare style will be. Obviously, we see a lot of units here landing on the fields, and that makes me wonder exactly how things will go, what kind of gameplay modes there will be. And another great thing to mention is that there is an editor. Yes, there's a scenario editor in some of the maps that are available in the game, and so if you want to have a U.S. Marine landing in some sort of Russian-held territory, or vice versa, you can do that, or perhaps defend the line of a large hill with endless numbers of troops approaching and see how long you can last. That is possible. Now, when I first saw this trailer, I thought, wow, it's the Soviet Union versus like the United States and France and perhaps other NATO units. Well, Broken Arrow is going to be more modern United States and modern Russian units, which obviously has some things from the Soviet Union days too, but it'll be coming next year to PC in beta, I believe just sometime around or early Q2. So here we have a lot of vehicles firing off. The game looks beautiful. More importantly to me are the animations and really what types of things we can do in this game. What's the capability of artillery? What are the tactics that can be deployed in the gameplay development? What kinds of things have the developers plotted in for us to utilize? For example, inserting troops or units behind enemy lines with helicopters. We won't get those answers today, unfortunately, but what I've seen here from the custom scenario editor, which this is how this mission here was made, this is just kind of a clunky little, maybe just a teaser on what we'll be just seeing in a few minutes of all the aircraft available and their capabilities of firing from distance and anti-aircraft units and the ability to fire cluster munitions or possibly napalm, etc., and deck building too. I suspect that the deck building will be a little bit more like it was in World in Conflict, where if you chose an airborne deck, that you'll be more limited to calling in mostly aircraft. In Wargame Red Dragon, it was kind of like you got to flex your muscle a little bit more in the aircraft department, but we're still capable on the ground with many other vehicles. But here it might seem that you're more restricted that way, and it could rely more on teamwork or for example, if you're going in with a group of Marines, then they're going to have more Marine-specific tactics or vehicles available, depending on the year and other things like that. But Broken Arrow, now finally, world premiere gameplay from their event just yesterday. Never before seen until their drop the other day. I did get a little early access to see this, but it is quite promising. Although this is an alpha. They were stressing the fact that a lot of what you're going to see might seem a little strange. In terms of tactics, you obviously don't want to drive tanks into battle like that. The roads might look a little wide, but I must say the mountains off in the distance look beautiful. And it makes me hope that there's going to be some really dynamic weather effects that perhaps change the course of battle. Violent rainstorms or snow could possibly change this battle. This is all speculation, of course, but from what I've seen so far, the developers, especially the lead developer, is somebody who used to just make missions in editors of many other games and wanted to take Wargame and other games and kind of mix them together. Obviously also inspired by some things from World in Conflict. The UI here is subject to change too. I'm sure everything that we've seen will look differently, but I must say the environments really look lush in terms of vegetation and what the kind of the more natural things look like. The lighting, the fog, the landscapes look good. I do want to see some more detail in the city, but again, that's nitpicking for something this early. But it is promising to see a bunch of tanks running into battle and artillery firing off from a distance and timing those attacks and pushing forward in time with the artillery. Now, some of the things that they've shown from the mission editor we'll get into in just a few moments, but if you've seen Call to Arms, Gates of Hell Ostfront, or Call to Arms, or even Meta-War Assault Squad on this channel, if you've seen any of the editors from me and any other creators, this kind of reminds me of that. They've made an editor that seems to be rather easy to design, where you can mark an area on the map for the player to capture once they do a massive counterattack comes out, and then you have to defend and hold the line. So again, very cool to actually be able to make perhaps a hold the line mission or a full-out attack mission, or a mix of both, perhaps some defending and retreating convoys or supply convoys, that type of thing. But for a game that is an alpha version work in progress, there's definitely a lot of good stuff going on here. I like what I see, and I want to cover more of the deck system later, which I think will be more about, instead of customizing individual decks, it'll almost be more about customizing the units. Since you'll be more limited to what you can bring into the battle, then you'll be able to customize the loadout of aircraft and tanks more often. I did see something along the lines of the helicopter, and I believe like certain vehicles being added. Instead of picking, like for example in Wargame, you would pick an artillery piece, or you pick an artillery piece that has a longer range and also a machine gun. Well, here, instead of picking the difference between the two vehicles, you can actually just pick what upgrades you want on the vehicle, which then I assume will probably increase the expense of the vehicle when you call it in, and also some sort of a limitation. As they mentioned, it will be a little bit more restrictive in this game, and I think that's not necessarily to hold you back, but to try to direct you in a certain direction. Obviously, if you're going tanks, and that's going to be your specialty, and they don't want everyone calling in, obviously, aircraft and paradrops, unless it happens to be airborne tanks, which in conjunction with airborne troops would be quite stellar. Well, there's a lot of shooting going on here, a lot of AT-GEMs flying off, a lot of rockets, a lot of tanks firing off too. Some of the tactics you're about to see might make you cringe, but again, this is a demonstration of the game, and we gotta be excited about stuff like this. I really was happy to go to the Slytherin event the other day, because what we really need in the RTS sphere, and hear me out here, is much more competition. From off the top of my head, I can think of a few typical RTS games, like for example Wargame Red Dragon, and also the returning Company of Heroes 3, but we need more contenders in the sphere, so that they have to work even harder to make more games, more diverse games, and I would love to see a game that gave us the dynamic campaign of World in Conflict. I must say there's probably at least once a year on this channel where I feel like World in Conflict, as beautiful and wonderful and immersive as that game was with its story, I feel like it constantly deserves a yearly playthrough from me and another spot on the channel. It deserves another opportunity to be showcased because it was that good. And if you don't know that game, if you've heard a lot of titles dropped here and you don't know about them, check them out. And Slytherin themselves, the developers, are really into wargame titles. They've been doing a lot of wargaming, a lot of games that seem like electronic tabletop games, and it's really nice to see them stretching their legs into this next, this next level of game. And this is what I would consider to be more of the AAA type real-time strategy games. If we're going to have units fight, I want to see them blow up, I want to see them take damage, I want to see them firing off, I want to see them flying over, and I don't want to look at a spreadsheet. And it's interesting to see people get into Hearts of Iron, for example, and then get into, maybe perhaps Grav Team Tactics, and work their way into other titles and games like, for example, Starship Troopers that this developer will be launching, and also a previously unannounced, very cool-looking strategy game for Terminator. Yeah, and there's also some other titles coming that we'll cover on the channel. But again, just make sure you subscribe to see all that, and let me know what you think so far. What are things that you like happening on the screen? What don't you like? Because I'm here just seeing all of this unfold, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. I like the graphics and how things seem to function, but I need to know more. Here we see helicopters being engaged by anti-aircraft guns and anti-aircraft missiles, and then the helicopters basically swarming those positions too, showing that helicopters are quite capable in this game as well. And I see the arrow coming in, which might mean off-map support, but who knows. I do want to see a full story campaign for both the Russians and the Americans here. I want these factions that, if they're going to be fighting, to have some, what do they call it, alternative history, or some real-world scenarios that are inspired by events that, I don't know. Hopefully we don't just get some fake made-up nation where these two are fighting over it. I hope there's some real world forces at work here that eventually lead into a cool dynamic story, being the motivator around the different campaigns that we could see. Wargame did a good job of creating that between, like, for example, North Korea and South Korea, with China, United States, and other factions getting involved. The same with, like, for example, China versus the UK during the Hong Kong campaigns. If you know what I'm talking about, great. If you don't, again, check them out. But more about this game here, I just really like what I see in terms of the landscape. We're seeing more of the wargame type landscape. If you remember Air-Land Battle and European Escalation, there was basically just 3 elevations in that game where everything kind of looked like a wedding cake. It was all flat except for the elevations were like 1, 2, or 3, and that's it. But here we're at least seeing a complete world that looks to be believable somewhere in, I would only could imagine, Europe. But again, if you wanted to create a Canadian scenario where the Canadians were invaded and overtaken and the Americans, I don't know, come to their rescue, whatever you want to do, that is up to you when you make these scenarios. And I want them to show off a little bit more of the editor here. During the live stream, there was some footage shown off. It kind of a little more difficult to read, but it's mostly menus stating, if you know basic programming, if this, then that, and or this. So again, if an enemy unit moves into a position, they get additional reinforcements. If you take it, then you get counterattacked. Something like that is definitely going to be present here, and that's a great appeal. It's something that we really wanted in Wargame Red Dragon. That's something I really wish to see in that game, and I continue to mention it because these two are very comparable. But the real question is, what the hell happened to Regiments and that other Cold War game that seemingly was very similar to a war game as well, though I guess they got it taken off Steam, but I really want to see some more competition here. We need to see another war game or more Steel Divisions, and I want more competition in this marketplace. And I want more people to want to play these games too, because they can be rather intimidating. Instead of controlling just one soldier or one vehicle in some of the missions from Call of Duty or, God forbid, Battlefield, we actually are seeing lots of units being taken into account here, and there is quite a bit of maybe prior knowledge that's needed to excel here, but these are the types of games I think that will be more difficult to master, but rather easy to learn, especially if there's some tutorials, campaigns, and a helpful community, which hopefully we all see. And another cool detail here is I believe I've seen animations on these vehicles where the visors and different things will move when the vehicles go into firing position. I believe some of these vehicles might actually have outriggers, you know, the arms that come out and push down in the ground for firing if their turret is turning to a certain direction. Possibly, but a lot of great units here that I've seen. We see AC-130s, and we see a lot of air support units from the Americans. And then also, where the hell's the naval combat, right? We saw in the trailer a lot of naval units launching Ospreys. Is that the start of a mission? I really hope we get to be able to use naval units to bombard ashore, maybe support some Marines as they push inland, and then continuously provide air support and fire support and just all sorts of cool stuff that could really make for a dynamic and interesting experience outside of just pushing troops forward to capture objectives. Hopefully there's a different way to play it every time. But the gameplay here looks promising. I think some of these cities look empty, but again, alpha. I hope to see a lot of like park benches and dumpsters and cars on fire and a lot of little details that we see in games like Call to Arms. I think Call to Arms is a fantastic modern RTS as well, on the more of a smaller scale, but much more detail. But this is the type of game that I really want, where instead of capturing a city, you're capturing cities within what seems to be a county rather than cities within like a global scale or a just one mission of rolling down Main Street and capturing a bunch of defensive positions. I also want to see units here garrison buildings that can then move around. It looks like they're shooting at each other from these buildings, but I really hope we, similar to Company of Heroes, get to choose to put multiple units in a building, maybe have some units on the north side, some units on the west side. For example, put a machine gun facing the road and an ATGM facing out back towards a large farm field or something like that. And having more control over how the units function and how they react, especially inside of these cities. A lot of the times in Wargame, you would just move from building to building, trying to avoid bombs coming in on artillery. But hopefully this game takes the best of World in Conflict, a little sprinkling of Men of War, Assault Squad, and other games like that. And then, of course, some of the stuff that I've seen from Regiments too, with its very own style. But it's really hard to to beat that formula that Wargame Red Dragon laid down over the European Escalation, Airland Battle, and Red Dragon. It's just been amazing. Well, I can only say that I'm hyped from here. I can only say that I have more questions than answers. They had my interest, and now they have my full attention. No, I should say they have my full attention. Now it's absolutely undivided attention. And I hope this is a wonderful title. Again, this will be entering beta sometime next year, so keep a lookout for Broken Arrow. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section, and I'll see you all very soon.